In Richmond.
Premier in his role as Minister of Regulatory Affairs and Service Effectiveness. We all agree that unnecessary red tape hurts Nova Scotian families and businesses every day. This government's Office of Regulatory Affairs and Service Effectiveness is pursuing a target of a net reduction in red tape to the tune of $25 million by the end of this year. They want us to believe that government intends to replace every new dollar in regulatory costs to business with an equal dollar reduction in regulatory costs. However, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business has pointed out that this policy does not apply to, quote, regulatory requirements developed in response to federal initiatives, which may significantly add costs and or burden to businesses in Nova Scotia. And I'll table that document. My question for the Premier is, will the significant costs of cap and trade and the legalization of cannabis be excluded from the red tape reduction efforts of this government?
Thank you, Mr. Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the honourable member for the question. I want to thank those at the Office of Regulatory Reform, Mr. Speaker, for the great work they've been doing. The amount she's committed to, I think, is over the 4 years commitment, Mr. Speaker. I also want to thank those who at Canadian Federation of Independent Business who have been great champions of our government and this province and the great work that has been happening around this file. We're going to continue to make sure that we continue to harmonize regulations across the region. Very proud of the work we've been able to do internally. As she would know, we led the charge of ensuring that the regulations around apprenticeships went national. We're going to continue from our vantage point to ensure that goods and services can flow in and out of our province, that we continue to make sure that our workers who are going to work in a neighbouring province or contractors are being able to do in a smooth transition. And I'm looking forward to continuing to make sure that our voice is heard on the national stage when it comes to regulation.
Member for Cape Breton, Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, as we know, this government continues to hide their cap and trade plan and its true cost to Nova Scotians. Nova Scotians are worried about how much legalization and enforcement of the new cannabis regime will ultimately cost us. Mr. Speaker, these are among several significant costs facing this province being imposed by this government's friends in the Trudeau government. These plans and their costs will no doubt be accompanied by bales of fresh red tape, and this government refuses to quantify at this time. Will this government commit today to including the cost of any new federally mandated regulatory requirements in the red tape reduction?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I want to thank the honourable member for the question. I want to thank all those Nova Scotians who, over decades, have continued to ensure that we do our part to ensure that we continue to improve the environment. Mr. Speaker, the greenhouse gas reductions, we're leading the country. Mr. Speaker, we're already at 2030 levels where the national government wants us to be below 2005. We believe we'll continue to be at 50% by roughly 2030. We're looking forward to continuing to make sure that we continue to protect the environment in our province. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, I think it's important that the honourable member understands that this government has made sure that when the plan was put together, that the hard work that Nova Scotians have already committed to is reflected in our plan. Mr. Speaker, I've come out very clearly. We're opposed to a carbon tax in our province, and we're going to continue to make sure that we...
Time allotted for oral questions put by members